what we had talked about last month, and just every step we go through for the environmental prevention webinars will be building upon the previous session. So if you do miss that session, we will have them all archived, and you can refer either you or your coalition folks back to the webinars. So just a quick recap from last month. When we're thinking about environmental strategies, they are truly evidence-based. So when we're looking at for funders and the information that they're looking for, some resources there to kind of underscore the fact that they are evidence-based. And what we're really looking for with an environmental change is creating long-term change. With individual strategies, it's very individually focused, hence the individual strategies. But along with that, the change is somewhat short-term, because if that individual moves outside of the community, or if they age out of your target demographic, etc., then you kind of lose them. So by creating environmental change, it's going to be long-term, because it changes not only individuals, but the whole community, and that's shown to be much more longer-lasting. Also, we want to look at using environmental strategies as an opportunity to really build those alliances with your key community partners. A lot of times it's challenging to get those connections, particularly if you don't live within the community that you are working within, but getting those connections set up. And when we're looking at environmental strategies, we're really looking at community norms, media messaging, addressing access and availability of the substance, and looking at policy and enforcement issues. So when we're looking for today, we're really focusing on the community norms piece as well as the media messaging piece. And then next month's session will be focused on access and availability and policy and enforcement. So when we're thinking about community norms, what we're looking at is just the basic orientations of your community of what is right and what is not right. So what is right, what is wrong, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and when we see deviance from those accepted behaviors, that's when the problems kind of come in. And norms can either encourage or discourage high-risk marijuana and other drug use. From last webinar, the focus in getting your feedback is really focused on really looking at the marijuana issue. So that's where this webinar and next month's will be focused on around marijuana. That isn't to say that if marijuana isn't the primary topic within your community that you couldn't put something else in, but that's just kind of our example area. So if underage drinking per se or opiates is a problem that you're experiencing with your community, think of some of these strategies, and the substance isn't really as important as the overall methods that we're trying to convey. So within those community norms, there's what we call the parable of the boiled frog. And taking you back to your 7th grade science class, mammals, people are warm-blooded and frogs are cold-blooded. So take you back to those times, and cold-blooded animals kind of adapt to their environment. So if you put a frog in a room temperature pot on your stove and you gradually turn up the heat, the frog's internal temperature is going to adjust to that. And over time, the frog is going to get cooked, but it doesn't really notice it because it adjusts to that. And that's really what we see when we're looking at community norms, is that they're not huge things that take place overnight, but they're gradual things that kind of change. Oh, we've got some decriminalization going on within our community, so we're not really focused on those small levels of marijuana use. And then, well, we've got a couple of dealers, but they know to stay away from the schools, so we're not really going to focus on that until it kind of expands from there that, well, marijuana is okay as long as it's for medicinal purposes. And, well, if you have problems sleeping, then that could be within that medicinal purpose. So when we're looking at these policies related to marijuana, they're really gradual pieces that have kind of worked in. When we're looking at marijuana in 1996, with California being the first state to really look at the medicinal piece, it was kind of revolutionary at that time, and we can see that in the last 19 years that it's really expanded from there. But it's not something that happened overnight. It's more of a gradual, broad process. So when we're thinking about what our communities look like, we really want to be knowledgeable about what the community norms are. So if we're thinking specific to marijuana, there are some norms that would encourage marijuana use or norms that would discourage use. So kind of a pro and con example. If you've got community that encourages marijuana use, it could be among the parents. Parents should be permissive with marijuana because they smoked it when they were their their student's age. So thinking about that, compared to parents should set clear norms with their child that marijuana use is unsafe, unhealthy, and unacceptable. So a lot of times we hear pushback from parents to say, well, I don't really know how to have those conversations with my student because I might have smoked when I was their age, and I don't want to be a hypocrite. Others that are encouraging is thinking if it's just weed. Well, at least it's not heroin. That's what we hear in a lot of communities as well. It's just weed. And one that would be discouraging those norms would be really looking at marijuana as being a mind-altering substance, and that even the quote-unquote just weed from the 70s isn't the same quote-unquote weed that we see today. And then another encouraging would be marijuana is medicine. And when we look at among students, that's a pretty consistent community norm that we see, and that everyone knows that tobacco use is harmful to your health. But amongst a lot of students, they look at marijuana as medicinal because that's what some of those media messages and community norms support. So when we're thinking about that, we'd really want to focus more on the discouraging side, that the federal government has determined that there is no therapeutic benefit to marijuana use. So through the DEA and the work that they do, and the FDA, and their scheduling and monitoring, making sure that that is the case. Sometimes it can be challenging to get a sense of what your community norms are, and there are some resources for that. Environmental scans, and they kind of vary from cost. Environmental scans are something that can be done extremely inexpensively. And a lot of these can be tailored from what we see from the alcohol side from an environmental scan, and they could be very dependent upon the laws within your state or your community related to marijuana access. So make sure that when you're looking for an environmental scan, that you get one that's appropriate to your community, or you adjust it to make sure that it's appropriate to your community. Another example is key informant interviews. So this would be where you're looking for getting a sense of what your community norms are from the community leaders. So that would be an example of sheriffs or police chiefs, your elected officials in city council or mayor, other personnel such as school or businesses, to really get a sense from a key leader perspective of what those look like. And there are a variety of key informant interviews that are available, and the Colorado State University has a great one, and we'll send that resource out in the follow-up call. And then there's the community-based surveys, and community-based surveys can be the most expensive of the three options if you choose for them to be. They could either be a mailed paper and pencil survey, or it could be a phone-based survey, or it could just be conversations that you have within your community. So it can be very broad, but from a scientific perspective, typically either the paper and pencil or telephone survey is deemed to be the most common and most accurate. When we're thinking about our community, going back to kind of that environmental scan piece, in Ohio it's not lawful to, marijuana is decriminalized. However, there is no medicinal or recreational use that's permitted. So in thinking about what the community norms would look like in Ohio, it's going to be different from what you might experience in your community. But this is just an example from a community festival in Columbus area. It's called ComFest, and this is a petition booth set up for therapeutic cannabis and industrial hemp petition. So looking at how therapeutic and medicinal cannabis can be, and a lot of times when we hear cannabis, we think, well, that's much more scientific and much more medicinal than what we might think of marijuana or pot. So be careful in the terminology that you use, and also make sure that your community knows what terminologies are available, because cannabis is the same thing as the marijuana that we see. And there's no such thing as medical marijuana compared to what you might find on the street. So there's a lot of some conflicting and confusing messages there. And along with those conflicting and confusing messages, again, this is an example from Ohio, we have Ohio for Responsible Gambling, which is a collaboration of 4 state entities to work to address problem gambling in Ohio. And again, the focus, just within the term that it says, is gambling. And then we have the Ohio Rights Group, which is organized by the pro-marijuana proponents. It's very marijuana focused and it's grassroots oriented. So we have just looking at the logo themselves, if you don't look at the text, and just with the O with the shape of Ohio in it, those can be very confusing for folks. So when you're seeing messaging, whether it's text messaging, whether it is graphic messaging, want to make sure that your community understands what those look like and that there's not confusion with those. And when we're also looking at some community norms, we want to think about what effective strategies look like. And some great strategies could be community scan followed by community education. So you do a community scan, get a sense of what your community looks like, what their attitudes look like, and what resources are available. And then you provide some community education to move in the direction that you want your community to go. So you don't want to go in with a message that's not consistent with what the needs of your community are, because then the community is not going to embrace it or feel that it's something that they can really latch onto. Another thing that you could look at is to make sure that your community festivals and public events are appropriate, so that there's not signage that the individuals that are attending the festivals or other public events are maintaining the law, and that there's appropriate law enforcement personnel there to make sure that the laws are being maintained. And we'll talk more about what that looks like next month when we look at our access and availability and our policy and enforcement pieces. And then also thinking about social norms campaign. Social norms are a great way to, in small, if it's done properly, in small messages, getting a message across to really support effective, appropriate norms within your communities. So example of this is from Florida, and they had a ballot initiative November, and their message to educate their Floridians was don't let Florida go to pot. And that was just kind of their brief marketing piece, and then they had supplemental things that kind of went along with that. So it was summed up very nicely and kind of really got the message across. Because those that are proponents of marijuana legalization are very good at their marketing pieces. That's something that we often struggle with because marketing is not our normal part of our job. So want to pull from the folks that we know, and this is a great opportunity to really pull in those community partners that you have where it is their job to focus on marketing and your media messaging to kind of get that through. So going along to that line of media messaging and many times provide opportunities how to learn how to use alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, learn how to use, circumstances when it's acceptable to use, how to improve those use techniques, and an association with more positive consequences. And this is some reinforcement that we commonly get within the media. I am a big Jimmy Fallon fan and watch The Tonight Show regularly. And he often mentions marijuana, but it's always from more of a tee-hee, let's joke about it type standpoint, and not from a serious perspective that we'd like for it to be. So when we're thinking about what marijuana looks like from a media perspective, we've got, of course, our marijuana poster children, and most of them are guys. Marijuana tends to be much more from a marketing and a media perspective, much more male-oriented. So you've got anybody from Willie Nelson to our friends here that professional athletes. We've got Justin Bieber. So it really spans the spectrum of knowledge and skill. I think when you look at Willie Nelson and kind of the older, typical hippie type guy of what we view marijuana as, that's very different than what we might see from Justin Bieber, who his demographic is much different than Willie Nelson's might be, even though they're still within the musical realm. So kind of think about not only the individuals that are looking for that, but some of the messaging that goes behind it. So marijuana didn't ruin his career or his life. Nope, he has a great career, even though he's a horrible actor, but yet he has a great career, and marijuana did not ruin that. So really kind of zoning in on, well, yeah, you're making examples of famous people, but that's not necessarily representative of the larger audience. So when we're thinking about typical media sources, we see a lot of messaging related to pro-marijuana sides in areas such as movies, television, music, radio, billboards, magazines, and even in clothing and on the internet. So just some examples of movies. We've got Pineapple Express and Half Baked. Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, Super Jaime. A piece to point out here is that when we're looking at kind of the stigma of marijuana or just drug use in general, there's certain images that can kind of come into mind. So when we look at these movies, we see that marijuana use is really prevalent amongst all demographics, except for the females. They don't seem to be well represented there. But in terms of racial demographics, it's well represented in a variety of ways. So that's just from the movie side. Then, of course, we have television that helps us better understand the marijuana industry, like with Weeds. Or we've got Wilford, a show on FX that is about a guy who has this dog neighbor next door, and he imagines that he's a person. And then we've got things that Weeds, which is it's HBO or Showtime, I can't remember which, that is cable television, paid subscriptions, much different than what we might see on network television with Two Broke Girls and their representations of marijuana. So when we're thinking about even access and availability, even though we're not talking about that till next month, just kind of the messaging, and it's all really interrelated, that really gets into mainstream audiences as well. Then we have our news outlets, and we've got Sanjay Gupta with CNN in his marijuana revolution and talking about the benefits of looking at marijuana from a medicinal perspective, which is much different than what we know, and is a much different process than we see from any type of medicine. And even thinking about the Ebola situation, Dr. Gupta was talking about, well, you really want to make sure that things are well documented and they go through an appropriate process, and even if it could be life savings, it really needs to go through the process. And what his views on related to Ebola seems to be quite contrary to what they are related to marijuana. So and it's hard for lay community folks that might have low news reach to really get those nuances. So having those conversations with a variety of people in your community will be an important piece. And then we've got things such as billboards that are more prevalent. And marijuana is safer than alcohol and football. How about that? Beer, football, marijuana is safer. So just reinforcing those messages doesn't have to be factually based, but just reinforcing those messages that marijuana is safer than these things that are so common within our American society. And then along the magazine side, we've got things that we've known and seen for many years, like High Times, and then we've got Weed World and Cannabis Now. So these are common pop magazines that have been around for a long time. So that's not really anything to be concerned about. But when you see kind of mainstream marijuana being picked up in areas such as Fortune or Time or Newsweek, magazines that my grandparents used to subscribe to, these are things that are hitting all kinds of demographics and are much newer and different than what we might know. So just from a community norm and a media messaging perspective, we're seeing that the prevalence or the acceptance of marijuana from a community perspective is definitely increasing. And then we've got our clothing, of course. We can't say who we are without wearing it. And we've got our nice "Don't Panic, It's Organic" or I Marijuana Leaf Colorado for their legalization efforts. So we've got the clothing aspects here, which I think are not great at getting the message out. And then we've got our religious clothing, which is just absolutely mind-blowing in my opinion, that God made grass and man made booze. Who do you trust? I think that's a message that the pro advocates can really look to. Doesn't have to make a whole lot of sense. It just has to make a good t-shirt. So God grew it, I smoked it, that settles it. Well, no, but the t-shirt says so. And then bong hits for Jesus. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. So really thinking about all kinds of areas in which we see these things. And then just looking at kind of the prevalence of having opportunities to work in marijuana. We've got the dry herb vaporizer kit with oil bundle. And this is something that was available on Groupon. So you can get your marijuana and then you can vaporize it too. It's so convenient with all these resources and outlets that are available. And this is a Groupon. So it's something that goes to many inboxes that are not necessarily connected to the movement, but can kind of get that underlying stream kind of going on that, hey, everybody smokes marijuana. It's just something that we do. And an important piece of this is related to media literacy. And media literacy is the ability to read or decode messages in various media sources. So we get these messages, we take them in, and a lot of times we just view them as at face value and don't really think too far into it. So this is an opportunity to really connect with your community folks, and not only youth, but adults as well, with really understanding and decoding what those messages look like. And Linda Ellerby, who's a producer and host for Nick News, sums it up greatly. So whenever I'm talking about environmental prevention, I like to add this quote because I think it's so perfect. But media literacy is not just important, it's absolutely critical. It's going to make the difference between whether kids are a tool for mass media or whether the mass media is a tool for kids to use. And we see all these different aspects here, and going back to the Marlboro Man, or see how far we've gone with Budweiser in alcohol marketing commercials, and even the during the Super Bowl with the Bud Light versus Budweiser Bud Bowl that they'd have, that we've made a lot of great strides in some areas, but we seem to be falling when it comes to the marijuana situation. So media messages can also send a clear message supporting healthy behaviors, and this is an example of a community here in Columbus area, and it's Dope Without It. So their focus was a marketing campaign for 18 to 25-year-olds, and really looking to kind of change that perspective that, oh, you can't be dope or cool without weed, that they can be dope without it. So really looking at this, and when you're looking at developing these messages, it's important to really draw in the audience that you want to be affecting. So something that we say is nothing about us without us. So if you've got a target market, make sure that they are involved within the messaging that you're working on. So when we're looking at some effective strategies, you really want to use the influence of the media to communicate those healthy choices, provide opportunities for media literacy for youth and adults. Again, it's important for youth to be media literate, but it's also, particularly when we're looking at this marijuana issue, important for adults to be media literate as well, because they're receiving a lot of varying media messaging, and it doesn't have to be accurate to resonate with them or to kind of be, oh, I didn't think about that. So really being very focused on that. You've got opportunities through PSA announcements, on radio and television, work with some of those local access stations that you have in getting those spread throughout, and also through newspaper articles. And if you see an article in your newspaper that's not really on message with, or is kind of on the Jimmy Fallon side of, well, we'll just make a joke about it, really having conversations with them about wanting to focus on promoting that healthy community, and if they're making comments, then take opportunities to kind of reframe the issue. Also focus on some billboards for promoting those positive messages. And you can use the influence of the media to really support that community change. If you're looking from a college area, you've got your guerrilla marketing that can help with that, really looking at sidewalks and social media to kind of get that out. There's also op editorials that you could do. You could hold press conferences and rallies to really kind of get that message out that the majority of folks do not use marijuana. They do not use these other substances, so we need to make the community more aware of that and really focus on the impact that some of these things are having within those communities. And when we're thinking about the media, there's a lot of challenges that can kind of fit within that. Evaluation is a big piece, and really evaluating the success of a campaign, particularly when we're looking from a media campaign. You can possibly get numbers for those who have reached, but the long-term success for that's kind of really challenging to quantify. Also, presenting the product in a way that reinforces those core needs. For the pro folks, they can lie, and that's acceptable for them. That's not something that we can do, so we really have to kind of think about a way that we can present the product, and the product doesn't necessarily have to be marijuana. The product can be a healthy lifestyle. So really looking at what that product is and making sure that it's really reinforcing the core needs of the individual or the core needs of the community. So kind of doing some reframing. And then for some challenges is that it must reach large numbers to be effective. So if we've got, just like with educational pieces, if I educate all the fifth graders, that doesn't mean that that education is going to resonate or bleed over to, say, the sixth grade or the fourth grade. So when we're looking at media challenges, those are very similar, that if we only educate or provide information to a small population, then they might have some attitudinal changes, but if it's not in a large enough population, then we're not going to get to a tipping point. And the biggest challenge that we have is that we don't have the money to finance campaigns like the pro people do. Our systems are just set up differently, that if they work and they do their fundraising and they get marijuana passed, particularly when we're looking at kind of that commercialization piece, there is a lot of money that can be made from this. And we're seeing that from those places that have legalized, such as Colorado. Now, the states are not making that money. The money's going to the pro folks who have commercialized, and so the states really aren't benefiting from that. The drug dealers are benefiting from that, but we're very challenged to kind of compete with some of those high finance campaigns. So along those lines, wanted to turn things over to Tony Coder, talk a little bit about some opportunities that you can have to better connect with your community, to really get some media messaging pieces, better communication pieces, and really have something where you're changing those community norms and be very action-oriented for you. So Tony, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Derek. Communication, why is it important? And especially when you're trying to develop messages for the media, communication is important because you want to be the one telling your story. There are so many people who may be affiliated, whether it just be through the media or whether it be through people's thoughts with you, and they may not be telling the same story that you want to tell. I know that there are some folks in the even in the world we live in, trying to prevent marijuana use, trying to prevent marijuana legalization, but they're not telling the same story that I am, or the Drug Free Action Alliance is. One of an example of that are people who are using more scare tactics. That we're going to have people who cut their babies' heads off and do who are running out of buildings and doing a lot of the old reefer madness pieces. I'm quite frankly embarrassed when we try to pull that kind of stuff, because it's not the story and it's not the reality that we really want to be affiliated with. We have to have this in a science-based and a rational argument, and we have to get away from the stereotype that we're often cast with, which is reefer madness. The other thing is, then you control your message. When you tell your story, you then control your message. It's not controlled by anyone else. You can actually talk about it the way that you would like to. How do I do this, Derek? Sorry. You also, this is a good way that you share information with others about you and your organization. It may be different from anything they've ever heard, and that's okay. And I think that's good when you can give your thoughts and maybe a new idea to someone who's never heard such a thing before. It also creates public awareness around the issue, around maybe some other possibilities, some other solutions to this problem. I think we've come sadly in a direction where we're only given two choices about marijuana. One, you either prohibit it, or the other is you legalize it. And I think that's awful sad. Do I think that there are some pieces of drug policy that need to be changed? Absolutely. Does that mean that I want legalization and commercialization to happen? No, I don't think that's good for the community either. So it can create public awareness and hopefully public conversation about the issue as well. It also creates a sense of connection with the organization. In Ohio, Drug Free Action Alliance is, whenever we get a call, it is about, whenever there's a story about marijuana, we are always we're always seem to be the first call about on the anti-legalization side. So media have come to us over and over around the state, even around the country. We have even been called by CNN and did a little piece when we debated, our executive director debated Sanjay Gupta. So we are known for being that voice in the community and in the state on this. It's also a platform to show that we're a good community partner around the state. We have the media, we have folks that listen to us and are influenced by our opinion, and then perhaps others will join on to that. And I think you need that when you're talking about marijuana. It can't just be from preventionists or treatment. It's got to be from law enforcement. It's got to be from business. It's got to be from a variety of different community sectors, and we can't forget about that. Also, I think good communication takes the technical aspect out of it for general public consumption, which basically is so many times we go, they have really, really simple lines. The drug war has failed. And our comeback is, well, in the last, since 1979, drug use has dropped 40%, which is, the messages, we need to take that technical aspect out of it. How do we create those messages to get it back to our side and really, really simple that people can understand? When you start using stats in your initial message and your basic message, you lose an awful lot of people in doing that. The other piece that I think is really important is, when we go with the plan, that why can't I just wing it? If I just wing it, then, I'll figure this out. I'm smart enough. But really what we do and what we try to do here at DFAA is we've come up with a strategic plan on how we answer these bigger types of issues. It does help with a big picture approach so that we aren't caught off guard and we aren't given some kind of question that we can't answer that leads us into a bunny hole. It helps us evaluate ourselves. What are we doing? Why are we doing what we're doing? How are we doing it? And who are we trying to talk to? So it really helps us get back to what are we doing and what are we saying about this, and even what kind of audiences are we trying to influence here. It also makes us look at the status quo. Where are we going? Are we the 1980s just say no folks that we have? No, not really. And we hope that we have gone past that and are more science-based and a little more thoughtful on things. Also, when you're talking, instead of a plan where I compare it to kind of grocery shopping, we try to do a strategic plan around our media messaging. And what I mean by that is communication is just you're simply checking off a list. Okay, I mentioned brain research, check. Okay, I mentioned car crashes, check. I mentioned commercialization, check. But it just gives us a checklist of yes, I made those checks off of my list. When really I think what we try to do is what are we trying to achieve? What kind of opinion? What kind of thoughts are we trying to give people out in the community? And I compare the grocery shopping, whereas you're going and okay, I got eggs, I've got milk, I've got butter. Instead, with a strategic plan, you're thinking about okay, I know I have my friends coming over on Wednesday, and I have to make a gluten-free meal because the person has a gluten allergy, or they're vegetarians, or whatever else. So you have those types of thoughts that you're having a strategy behind it instead of just picking up milk, eggs, and bread, and when your friend comes over with a gluten allergy, you just can't give them water. So it's a little bit stronger than that. And doing that, there's 8 steps to creating that strategic communication plan. One is just determine your goal. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to influence? Are you trying to change opinion? Or are you just trying to create public awareness that this is out there? We might need to deal with it. identify and profile your audience as a general audience? Are you trying, in 2015, there is a group that's trying to get it on the ballot, trying to get a marijuana legalization ballot initiative for November. Well, in 2015, who are the people we are trying to look at? Well, they're the voters who we're trying to educate. We're not trying to lobby or anything like that, but we're focusing on older individuals who are mainly the voting bloc for off-year elections. So you have to look at that. Also establish your partnerships, develop your message, which we'll go into. We have this 8-step plan to actually come up with something that will be strategic and that will be well thought out before we just go out there and start talking. One of my big problems, and I think Derek would agree, is sometimes I just let things fly out of my mouth here at the office before thinking about them, and I'm sure everybody's done that. That's something, oh my God, why did I say that? I wish I could take that back. Coming up with a plan like this, coming up with your talking points, actually helps to limit that to an absolute minimum, because once it's out there, whether it's on social media, whether it's in media, in the traditional media, it's out there forever, especially with the internet. If you look up if you look up someone's name who's done something really bad, you don't come back to anything they might have done that was good in their life. That's going to be the first 10 or 12 things that comes up as you Google search them. So when you determine your goal, what you really want to do is establish for yourself a set of clear and measurable goals for communication, and they should be pretty specific, so that when you're talking to the media, that you're trying to reach so much of your target population, and just a minimal number of goals. You're not going to probably go to the New York Times, and you're not going to change opinion by 60%. What are those things? Can you actually have a little blip on the radar that could actually be something that the folks could, or that your organization could actually bank on and then work on? Start small and make sure that you aren't trying to bite off media-wise in your messaging more than you can chew. Another thing when you're determining your goal, really look at your organization. What we had to do here is we looked at, what are the values? Are we looking at decriminalization of marijuana? Is that something we really want to pay attention to? Is it more of the legalization of marijuana, the commercialization of marijuana, the medicinal component of marijuana? What are those goals of your organization? What are we trying to stop, or what are we trying to promote? And I think really understanding your organization is really helpful in determining that. And also, are you prevention or are you health promotion? And what I mean by that, and this is according to the Journal of the American Medical Association, preventing something means averting the occurrence of a disease. So you're trying to stop something. Are you trying to stop marijuana use in your community, or are you doing some promotion? You're trying to increase health. If people would stop smoking marijuana, if people wouldn't use marijuana, you have a much higher chance of becoming a college graduate. You have a much better chance of fulfilling the potential in your life. So is it that health promotion? So you have to kind of consider what your purpose is. Is it prevention or is it health promotion? And I think also when you're creating messages, too many times people talk about what you want to say, when really, when you're doing communication plan, one of the next things you need to do is identify and profile your audience. What kind of audience are you targeting? Is it young people? Is it young voters, 18 to 25? Is it senior citizens? Because they all have different types of messages, and I break them down into three different three different types of audiences. One is the primary audience. What group's knowledge, attitudes, behaviors must be changed to meet your goal. In this election this year, we have to consider what the target audience, which is mainly seniors. They're the ones who have the biggest voting bloc in an off-year election. We have to educate them and think about what are the things that really matter to them. Our secondary goal is who is affected if you achieve this goal. So it's not only seniors, but it's young people, college students, all of these different folks. And then also the I can't say the word tertiary, but the third group that we need to consider are others who can influence your primary and secondary audiences. It can't be just us. It's hard for me to go into a law enforcement organization or a big conference like that because I don't speak law enforcement lingo. I said doobie in a law enforcement conference, and someone came up and said he was going to hit me in the back of my head with his gun because cops don't say doobie. It just made me look out of touch. It made me look out of that I didn't actually relate to them. I guess in cop terms you do use the word blunt instead of doobie. So there's your free lesson of the day. But you have to think about those folks as well. And you also, when you're looking at your audience, you have to look at who they are, as far as education level. When you're talking about their education level, one of the pieces, I used to work for the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, which managed a lot of the social services in the state of Ohio. And when we had to write letters and come up with policies, there were two different letters we had to write. One was for folks who were out in the public, which we were told to write for about a sixth grade reading level. And then there were legislators who you could go into more technical terms, whereas even you had to write letters for CMS, which is County Medicaid Services, I think is what the acronym stands for, which is the federal government, where you could go really, really technical. So you have to consider your audience and where they stand right now. Also, who are the influencers? Who are those in those communities who are the credible communicators? And then what are their motivations and their culture? If I, being a Caucasian, it is extremely hard for me to go into an African American neighborhood and talk, not knowing that they have many different types of concerns about marijuana. Their young people are getting arrested at a much higher rate than those in rural neighborhoods. They're getting, it seems like police officers and some of the judicial systems are I've heard that they're being targeted. So those are some of those culture things that I don't understand. So to have those types of communicators who can speak in languages and the understanding for those types of, for any type of sector of the community is extremely important, and you have to understand that. When you're talking about your primary audience consideration, you have to understand that you have to see whether they're in agreement with you on this issue. If you're talking to a college community instead of a senior population, you might get a whole different set of answers and sets of opinions on things, on whether they agree with you, especially on marijuana or not. Does your audience support you? Those are things that you have to think about, and why would they buy into you? What are some arguments that you could use to help them understand and maybe think of what is something that may be of consideration? When you think about your secondary audience, how is this going to be a benefit to them? How do I communicate that this issue somehow impacts them. With businesses, why do I care about marijuana legalization? Well, you have to tailor it to the fact that more workers will have marijuana in their system, which then sets up the whole issue of drug testing, pre-employment testing, productivity, workers' comp losses, unemployment, health care, all of those types of things. Also, when you consider your audience, make sure that you understand that high involvement versus low involvement audiences. And there are some products that are high involvement. Cars. I am a Honda guy. I will never drive anything but a Honda. I don't know why. It's just something that I really, really like, and I buy into that. Shampoo is another thing that is a high involvement product. Most people buy the same shampoo every time. Toilet paper is big for whatever reason. You're either a Cottonelle person or you're a Charmin person, and you do not waver from those types of products because you're bought into this position for whatever reason. So no matter if a Cottonelle person comes up to you and starts saying, I really think Cottonelle is the way to go, you're going to say, you know what, I'm cool with my Charmin, leave me alone. The same with weed. There are some people you're not going to change their mind. You can talk to them, and you can present your arguments, but at the end of the day, they're not going to change their mind on things. With low involvement audiences, they don't really think about it. They think they might have an opinion, but they can also be influenced, and they can also have their mind changed. So what audience are you focusing on? Are you focusing on the high involvement? Me writing for High Times Magazine would be an absolute waste of my time. I'm not going to change any readers, very few readers, minds on marijuana legalization. How do I? So what groups am I looking at as far as getting my message out there? And with high, what you have to remember is that about 30% of people are high involvement on any issue. So when you're, and I'm talking about both sides. So you're talking about 15% or so on the pro side who are just dead set for legalization, and you have about 15% who are dead set against legalization. That means about 70% of the people are low involvement. Those are the people that you want to look out for. You want to look for. You want to try to influence them. Give them. They will listen to arguments. They'll listen to things that may be that are rational, and maybe you can change their mind a little bit. So when you're talking, try to focus on those low involvement folks that you can actually make a dent in and have a civil and good conversation with. Maybe you don't change their mind at the end, but maybe you give them something to think about as well. When you're developing messages, make sure that the messages are simple and that they convey key information. They're going to be the basis of our talking points, our radio, PSAs, all of those types of things. Our messages are not going to include all the detail, all those supporting data, all of those stats, and all of those things, and they're not going to be complicated. Marijuana legalization is winning right now because it's simple. The drug war has failed. Simple message. They don't have any stats in there. They don't have any kind of backing, but everybody believes it. I have people who are in prevention saying, you know what, yeah, I guess it has. Whereas, again, it goes back to, well, we've actually reduced drug use by about 40% since 1979. So has it really failed? But, it's something that is really simple and something that people have bought into. So when you go into your messages, they are one would be marijuana legalization makes highways more dangerous. It's simple, to the point. Whereas I've also seen that some people have made their messages, traffic deaths have tripled over the last 10 years where an individual has marijuana in his or her system. That is a terribly complicated piece of information to try to remember. If I'm talking to Derek and I can say, man, marijuana legalization makes highways more dangerous, Derek can remember that. If I tell him that same thing traffic deaths have tripled over the last 10 years, he may go to his next, it's like the telephone game, he may go next to the next person and say, man, traffic deaths have grown 10 times with triplets over a number of years. I mean, you can get that mixed up because there are too many numbers and it's too confusing. As you do underage drinking. Underage drinking is a key factor in campus sexual assaults. That's easy. That's easy to remember. That's easy to kind of swallow. Whereas I've also seen sexual assaults occur on campus largely because of underage drinking and lax supervision at fraternities and sororities. What you've not only done is made that way too confusing, but you've also alienated people who could be your potential partners, which are fraternities and sororities. So you have to watch that as well. And I know I'm running out of time, so we're going to skip some of these. But again, your message considerations, it has to be clear, has to be consistent. Make sure that your main points are never hidden and that they're repeated. Also, your tone and appeal kind of depends upon your audience. You can be a lot more gruff with a group of law enforcement folks than you can with your church social group or something like that. Also, again, the messenger and their credibility is something that really needs to be considered. So, your message, is it based on emotional or rational argument? Is the message repeated? And really, messages are best used when using emotion and then backing it up with stats, making sure you have that emotional hook to get people to kind of read on, and then you can start using your stats. And then also, who else endorses this belief? That maybe if you use partners and those types of things, that, okay, I don't know who Drug-Free Action Alliance is, but I do know who my sheriff is in my local town, and that he or she's a good person. So yeah, I kind of believe what they're saying now. And when you do that, you develop your messengers, and then as we look real quickly at the top communicators of 2012, I picked one Republican, and these were actually the top two, one Republican, one Democrat. Both of them used personal stories. They were confident. They exposed their vulnerability. They also used some humor in their messages. Humor is a big issue, and it's hard to have humor in our world, especially when talking about legalization. But those were folks those were number 1 and 2 in 2012 of top communicators. Whereas you look at the worst communicators of 2012, it's the dude who wrecked that ship off of Italy, Francesco Schettino. Why was he one of the worst communicators? Well, he lied about his situation. He was frantic. He didn't know what he was saying. He made up different kind of stories. And he was also silent. He didn't know what to say. And then also former Missouri Congressman Todd Akin. He had some comment about legitimate rape, that if a woman, a baby knows, I guess a woman's body knows that it has been raped. So if that woman's body knows that, then the baby will be aborted or something like that. It's the craziest comment in the world. It's quite insensitive. There's no basis to it. And the guy, a week later continued to stay with that if a woman, he didn't say, you know what, I was an idiot. I, completely misunderstood, was misquoted, or whatever you want to say. He continued to say that if a woman is raped, that woman's body will know that that she was raped and will abort the baby naturally, so we don't need abortion. Silliest thing in the world. So when you think about those types of things, make sure that your communicators are someone that people believe in, that have those good qualities about them. I list this out, the messenger inventory, what they need, what their perspective is, who they represent, what kind of people they could be reaching, and then you can also establish your partnerships through your message. And choosing your partners, you can prioritize your contacts, you can make your proposals strategic, and you can also have face-to-face follow-up. So you're going to get some partners out of some of your messaging. We have done that through our marijuana messaging here in the state of Ohio. And don't forget about social media. social media is a must in advocacy because it reaches so many people. How many people check their Facebook before they check their newspaper? A lot of people do. A lot of people get their news from social media. That is just something that is in our culture. It's immediate, it's easy, it's free, and you know what? You also get a lot of customer feedback. Some of it not too nice, but a lot of it is. And when you also think about social media and its reach, you can see that that 78% of marketers saw an increased traffic to your page, to your Facebook or Twitter page, just 6 hours a week invest in social media. The other piece that I thought was really interesting about this report was that average citizens are more likely to visit your Facebook or Twitter than your website. So our Drug Free Action Alliance website, more people are visiting our Facebook, more people are visiting our Twitter than they are our website. When you're thinking about investing in a website, make sure that you also a primary aspect is reaching that social media. And then also with your messages, again, if we're focusing on seniors and older individuals, news conferences, newspapers, radio call-in shows, that's your best way of reaching those folks. A great deal of them don't understand Twitter at all. If I'm trying to reach a college-age kid or a high school kid, I'd use Twitter a lot more. So you have to choose your activities and your materials, and then your materials to support your activities are those fact sheets, the news releases, op-eds, everything that you want to be able to be seen by the masses, and make sure that they're all based on those initial messages that you have in the beginning. So I'll turn it back over to Derek and let him take over.
Thank you, Tony. And this is where we've reached our question and answer portion of today's section. So if you have a question, please feel free to ask it in the question section of your GoToWebinar navigation panel. It looks like we have a couple questions in here so far. The first question is from Cynthia. I do regular presentations for community groups on heroin and opiates. Recently, I've asked my personal view on medical marijuana. Any suggestions on how I should respond to this question? And I'll answer for a little bit, and if Tony wants to chime in, he certainly may. And Cynthia, I would definitely recommend that you go to the marijuana resources that we have on our website at drugfreeactionalliance.org/marijuana. And there are a variety of resources there. There's also the marijuana quiz that can be a good resource for folks within your community. And most importantly, there's our position paper looking at the issue related to medical marijuana, and is it really a good approach to vote on our medicine? So it's a pretty simple kind of thing to think about is, do we vote on our Percocets? No, we don't do that. We have a medical process that really goes through and makes those determinations for us. So those would be some recommendations or suggestions that I have for you. Tony?
Another good resource is learnaboutsam.org. They have fact sheets and talking points and those types of things, and they actually kind of have a Q&A piece on that. I guess the way that I would answer that is if I were asked, heroin and marijuana, it would be simply, why do we want to allow another substance out there that would endanger kids' potential? And it's interesting because no one's ever asked me, well, what do you think? Which is worse, alcohol or tobacco? Well, no one really asked that. They're dangerous in different ways. No, is marijuana ever going to kill you? Probably not. Smoked marijuana has never killed anyone. Now, the forms that we're using now, where it's commercialized and where it's edibles and all of those other types of things, the drinks, those are pretty dangerous, and those have led to a couple of folks' mental health instabilities and have led to some issues for those folks, including some people either committing suicide or killing another person. So it's interesting to me how they want to make those determinations, but we have an awful lot of information now on marijuana that we didn't have a few years ago. And again, it isn't the physical health, but more the mental health that we really have to concern ourselves with.
Thank you, Tony. And this question is from Monica. Her question is, where does this type of messaging fall under CADCA's 7 strategies for community change? And in looking at the 7 strategies for community change, it really looks like it fits best with providing information and enhancing skills, particularly in things such as brochures, dissemination, billboards, things like that. Providing information would be the best fit related to that question. So thank you, Monica. This question from again from Cynthia. What is the best response when asked my personal views on the legalization of marijuana? I am getting this question more frequently from adult audiences, even though I am not doing presentations specifically on marijuana. Tony, do you want to talk about that one?
Sure. I think the first thing that I always say is, what are we talking about? Are we talking about decriminalization of marijuana, or are we talking about commercialization? Because a lot of times with the messages that the pro-marijuana groups use, it is it's about, we want to release people from prison, and we want to make sure that people aren't going to jail for for smaller crimes, and even the racial disparity arguments that we're hearing about. But if you're talking about decriminalization, quite frankly, there are some issues that I think we need to work on. One is, I don't think that a person who has a marijuana joint in his or her pocket, should be, I guess, dissuaded or disbarred from going to the military or going to college or anything like that. I think there are some things that we have to fix. I think we have to promote treatment. However, what I talk about when I talk about legalization is commercialization. You're going to create a market that is going to be based on profit. It's going to be based on these edibles. Show pictures of edibles. It's amazing how many adults don't know that these products are out there. And if you do marijuana edibles in Google Images, there's just a boatload of them out there. So when you look at those types of things, make sure that you're trying to decipher exactly what it is, what they're talking about. Decriminalization, yeah, let's have a good conversation. Commercialization, I'm really unsure whether that's the best thing for this country, and to market some of the products, the candies and the drinks and the gummy bears and all of those types of things. I don't know if that's best for society. So that's how I would answer that question.
Thank you, Tony. The next question is, can you give some examples of environmental scans for marijuana? And this question is from Judy. And Judy, that's really dependent upon the laws within your community. For instance, an environmental scan in Ohio would look more at head shops and our waterbeds and such and things like that, since marijuana is not legal within the state. Also looking at community festivals and seeing the prevalence of paraphernalia related, whether it be marijuana T-shirts or if you smell smoked marijuana. So what we see in Ohio might be very different than what you might see in California, for instance, where there's, or other states that have marijuana either from a medicinal perspective or from a recreational perspective. And on the screen there are just 2 examples of 2 marijuana retail outlets from the outside to kind of see what that looks like. And they oftentimes use that green plus sign that we normally think of is that red cross for the medical, for red for regular medical things. So things like that to really get a sense of what environmental scans might look like for your communities. So again, depending on your laws, think about retail outlets, think of community festivals, think of shops where marijuana paraphernalia might be purchased. Also think about your local convenience stores. Are they selling rolling papers? Are they selling other paraphernalia that you can use to smoke marijuana or other things to use it? So kind of think of those areas and see what is best appropriate or most appropriate for your community. Question from Allison is, can you email links to these websites in the email with the PowerPoint? Allison, we will definitely do that, and that is on my list of things to do. So just to recap, the link to the recorded session, along with the copy of the PowerPoint slides, a certificate of attendance, and other resources will be emailed to you. That will go out to you by Friday, so expect for it there. This question is for Tony, related to the communication strategies and the low and high involvement. And where did you have those stats or resources, and how can Laura learn more about that?
What we did, we at Drug Free Action Alliance actually contracted with The Ohio State University, a professor there talking about persuasive communications. And we just took this hour course talking about how to persuade somebody, how to I guess basically, for lack of a better term, change minds of individuals. And that is where we received a lot of our information about doing that, and how we need to focus on folks who are those low involvement folks who, again, if you look at polls or anything else, 51% of America believes that marijuana should be legalized. First off, you have to look at the question. The question is, should it be legalized? Okay, yeah, I guess so. What's the big deal? Whereas if you gave them information, you can change those people's minds. And really, all we are 2 percentage points away from changing to 49% believe marijuana legalization is, it's 2 percentage points. And if we continue to educate the community, we don't have to lobby, we don't have to do any of that kind of stuff which puts us in danger. But if we just do those and focus on those peoples whose minds we can change, we can turn the tide on this. I'm absolutely 100% in belief of that. And we look at marijuana. Even back in the 70s and 80s, the early 80s, marijuana legalization was the craziest thing that anybody would say. Only like 17% of people said that marijuana should be legalized. But it was just chipping away at people and their attitudes on it that actually got them the majority. We can chip that back if we have sound and really, really easy, digestible messages that we use.
Thank you, Tony, and that is all the time that we have today. Just wanted to make you aware of trainings that we have available. So through the Drug Free Action Alliance homepage, you can see the list of training opportunities that we have. Some of these we offer within Ohio, or if you'd like to bring us in from outside, we're certainly happy to do that for you. Environmental prevention strategies, like what we're discussing about in this three-part series, making the case for coalitions, and the substance abuse prevention skills training, or SAPS, are some of the ones that we offer. Also, to continually get your feedback and make improvements for these sessions, we do want your feedback, so we'll be sending out a SurveyMonkey survey post-session, so you'll get that information. And also wanted to invite you to the final series if you've not yet registered. That will be May 12th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I promise I won't be sick then. And you can register at drugfreeactionalliance.org/upcoming events. And if you've missed one of these segments, or if you'd like to participate or get the information from some of our previous webinars, our archived webinars are available on our YouTube channel, and they include those that are listed on the screen there. So again, just to recap, we will be sending out the copy of the the link to the recording, along with the certificate of attendance and a PowerPoint slides and the links that we had mentioned to, and that will go out by Friday. And if you have questions, either between then and now or at any point, feel free to contact us at Drug Free Action Alliance at 614-540-9985. Extension 17 is Tony, extension 16 is me, and our information is there on the screen. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you'll reconnect with us on May 12th, and we'll finish out the third part of our three-part series on environmental prevention strategies. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Thank you.